Hi there, and welcome to week 2 of Jake Bakes Halibakes. Today I want to bake apple pie because it's iconic. It's like the dessert that everyone thinks of coming home, their mom makes, their gay uncle makes. I wanted to do that, but put a holiday spin on it. So I'm adding some cranberries and some mulling spices that'll really bring out sort of the specialness of the season. So join me in the kitchen and let's get this started. Pie crust is one of the easiest things to make, but it's probably the scariest for a lot of people because you don't want tough pie crust. You want that iconic, delicious pie crust that goes on every single pie. If you didn't know, there are actually two types of pie crust. There's really flaky pie crust, and there's tender, crumbly pie crust. The one that I'm going to be doing is a more tender, almost kind of cookie-like crust, but it's just more crumbly and delicious. You're gonna have 3 cups of flour, all-purpose, 1 cup of lard. Lard is key in this if you want the most tender crust. You want 5 tablespoons of ice water and 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. This helps to tenderize the crust as well. So this is it, that's it. You want everything really cold though, because you don't want the butter to melt too much. Cut this up into smaller sort of, I don't want to say bite-sized cubes because I don't really want to bite into lard, that's disgusting. I'm gonna cut this up though into like quarter size amounts, and then I'm gonna cut this in. And this is something you can do ahead of time and chill, because the pie crust, it needs to rest too, so you wanna keep everything pretty cold. I rub it in with my hands. That's the best way I think to do it, because you can feel as it starts to come together. You want it to look like breadcrumbs. If you want to have more flakiness, you can leave it right when it starts to look like bread, like pebbles, like little pea rocks. But like I said, we're doing that tender crust, so we want it to look like breadcrumbs. Alright, so we've now got this nice and crumbly, and you can see even I left a few chunks in there, but it's basically like breadcrumbs. And you can tell when it's all mixed in that if you clump it together, you get a little bit of a dough sort of forming, but it's way too, you couldn't roll this out. This would crumble to pieces. Now that it's like that, we want to add 1 teaspoon or 1 tablespoon at a time of the water. So I put a few ice cubes in here to keep it cold. We just want to get this, well, like wet enough until it starts to come together to form a dough. And so I'm gonna mix this up together. It's starting to come together pretty nicely. So now that I have it, like it's starting to clump even more, but I want to add the egg in before we get too far, or else it will never mix in. Put that done. I'm gonna add the egg in. Mix this in nicely. And now we've pretty much got a dough going, which is good. And the sort of secret ingredient to keeping it really nice and short, 1 tablespoon of vinegar. I'm using apple cider vinegar because it's an apple pie. You can use whatever vinegar you have, but you want to use typically a pretty flavorless or flavor neutral. So like white distilled is fine. So this is good. We need to let this chill and rest so that the dough relaxes and it's easier to roll out. So I'm going to get some cling film, pick all of it up, like this. Get all of it out of the bowl too, you want to not waste any. Once it's on here, I try to get it into a close shape of what we're going to roll it out to. I want to get it a little bit flatter than it is now. Because when we roll it out, we don't want to roll it more than twice. So if we get this pretty flat now, we're not going to have to roll it out as many times. You don't want to let it dry out in the fridge, so you do want it pretty well covered. There's one thing I cannot do in the kitchen. It's that. And we're good. So I'm going to pop this in the fridge to chill for about an hour. While we're doing that, get the apples ready, the filling for the pie. We want to go ahead and peel and core 3 pounds of apples. And I've chosen Honeycrisp for this because they're a little bit sweeter to counterbalance the tartness of the cranberries. So I got 3 pounds that are going right into our saute pan. Get them all out. Come on, little guys. Perfect. And I'm going to turn this on about medium high. And we want these in here. As soon as we get them in, I'm going to sprinkle in about a cup of sugar. Sprinkle it over. Alrighty, and then I'm going to add my spices. And for my spices for this, I wanted to incorporate your standard apple pie spices. So I have cinnamon, nutmeg, and clove, but I also wanted to add a little bit of that mulling. So I added a little bit of orange zest as well. So I have about 2.5 teaspoons of cinnamon, about a teaspoon of nutmeg, and about a half to a quarter teaspoon of clove, just because I don't want that to overpower everything. Pour that in over my apples. So I'm gonna let these sit for a few minutes, and I'm gonna get a little bit of salt on there too. The salt will make that sweetness pop just a little bit more. While we're doing that, I'm gonna zest an orange. And this is about a half a teaspoon of orange zest. And after these start to get a little bit tender, which these are getting there, these are almost there, it doesn't take very long at all, you want to add 1 vanilla bean that has been scraped out. You don't want to add the vanilla bean in right away because that can, the vanilla can sort of cook out and you'll lose some of that flavor. So the vanilla bean added at the very end brings a little bit more of that vanilla. All right, here is that vanilla. Looks like dirt, but I promise you it's very delicious dirt. The scent is so amazing. It's so homey. Alrighty, so our apples are really nice and tender. We've got a lot of liquid sort of forming up. It's almost like a jelly-like liquid because it's so like viscous. But that is perfect. What I'm gonna do is turn off the stove because now we're gonna add the thickeners in there so that we don't get no soggy bottom because no one likes a soggy bottom. And I'm going to add about a tablespoon of cornstarch and about a tablespoon of flour. Now, stove is off. I want to add in the cranberries so that because we don't want to add them in too early because then they'll just get really gross. So I'm going to use about a cup of fresh cranberries. Oh my God, it's so pretty. This is nicely mixed in, and we want to let this cool before we put it in our pie. Now we're going to trade off. Now that the pie dough has chilled long enough, I'm going to pull that out and roll that out into my pie tin, and then let this cool a little bit so that it's not going to sort of cook my pie crust right away. And then we'll fill it, top it, and get it in the oven. Our dough has been chilling for quite a bit now, and it is nice and cold to the touch. We're gonna roll this out, and so you wanna flour your board, or your kitchen. You don't get too much flour, but you wanna make sure that's not gonna stick, because as soon as it starts to stick, you're gonna get a little bit of cracking. And this is the part where I had to learn to not be a perfectionist, because I have a lot of problems with my pie crust a lot of times cracking. But you know what I found out? People don't notice. They love it, they eat it, and they thank you. And it's really delicious. I'm gonna go ahead and roll this out. I'm gonna put a little bit of flour on the top too. If you get your fingers coated in flour and then sort of flick it, it does it a little bit better. So, alrighty. And this will crack, always. I've yet to have a pie crust not crack. But the good thing is, it doesn't matter because just keep turning it and go. Since it is just lard and flour, you can basically just push this all back together. So if you are having troubles with it cracking pretty badly, you can just push it back together and it's fine. And keep turning it so that it's not sticking. And you want to get this out to, I like to say, at least 1/4 of an inch. You don't want a really thick pie crust because no matter how flaky it is, it's gonna come out really tough and no one's gonna like it. Now, I have my pie dish. It's about a 9-inch pie dish. You wanna make sure when you put it over there, you got about at least an inch around it because it's gonna sink in. And to get the pie crust on here, I typically roll it like this, pick it up, put all of it on there, and then your pie dish, roll it back out over it. See how I have cracks? That's okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab a knife and trim the pie edges. So I'm just mold this to the pie tin itself. And once we have it molded, we want to let it sit in the fridge for about 20 minutes, because if you don't, since we're stretching this dough a little bit more than it was when it came out of the fridge, it'll shrink back in and it'll get a little shrinkage. Because this is going to be a double crust, I'm not too worried about these edges here. They're going to be covered by the top crust. Just to add a little bit more here. Alrighty, this is gonna go in the fridge for about a half hour just to let it sit up and get a little bit harder before we add everything else in. Our pie crust has chilled well enough, and now I'm gonna add in our filling. Oh, yummy. Oh, this smells so good. And this is gonna look like a lot of filling, but trust me, these apples will sink as they cook. And now for this pie, I wanna do a lattice. So what I'm gonna do is take thin strips of pie, and I'm going to do 5 across. And this is just the pie dough that I used that I am now rolling out, getting it laid down. Lattice. No, I'm just kidding. So now, as I go the other way, lay one right in the middle, pull it back, lay this down. Now these go back over. And if these break, totally okay. Egg wash or water will get you back in business. Like that one. Alrighty. So add this back on here. Cover this up. Fold this over this way. And add, I want a smaller one than that. It's right here. This goes back over. All right, and then the other ones do the same exact thing, just the opposite side. And there you go, there's a lattice. Now we need to clean this up a little bit. So what I do is push these down, push each little edge down. I want to save this one because I have one that I already made for you guys in the oven finishing up. Because I wanted to show you 2 different types of crust. If you wanted to do the lattice, which I love doing the lattice, or a double crusted one. So I'm gonna toss this in the freezer. Cover it in the freezer for about a week. When it's done, pull it back out, let it defrost in the fridge overnight, and then pull it out, brush it with egg wash, so just 1 egg and a little bit of cream or milk, and then brush it really nicely. Sprinkle some sugar on top. I like that. It gives it a nice little crunch. And then you're ready to go. You can set it, put it in the oven at about 400 for about 10 to 12 minutes, and then lower the temperature down to 375. Let it bake for a long time, about 45 minutes to 50, or until everything starts to bubble up inside. I want to show you the one that I already have made because I love it. The double crust turns out really good. I like a double crust. The lattice is a little bit prettier, it's a little bit more fancy, but this guy's gorgeous. Ooh, daddy. Oh my gosh. This right here is gorgeous, and oh my God, it smells amazing. I wish you were in here because this is home, and I really want to try this pie. So, oh God, those apples look good. Get a little bit of that top crust. Look at how flaky that is. That is just absurd. I am not one for pie crust, but that is good pie crust. And so simple. You saw it. It's so easy. This pie crust is really hearty too, and everything is delicious. If you like this recipe, which I promise you will, it's so good. It's everything that's wonderful about being home for the holidays. Please like, share, and subscribe this video, and we'll see you here next week for another edition of Jake Bake Holla Bakes. See you then. 5. You guys, you have to try this. Oh.